This is Unfiltered, presented by Youth of MCC.
All right, so welcome back. We are on our third week of the podcast. We have some new faces here, Timur and Anam. How about we just start off with you guys kind of explaining, what you guys do within the community, a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there into our third week's podcast. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Salam, guys. My name is Timur. I go to DePaul University. I'm about to graduate this upcoming June. I am Pakistani. I'm half Punjabi, half Kashmiri. And I got involved with the MEC, Youth MCC program back in, I think 2017. I've been with them ever since, and I'm currently a part of the Big Brothers program with a bunch of these other guys on the podcast.
Salam guys, this is Anam. I am a recent graduate from Loyola University, and I'll be going back there for my graduate degree. I'm really excited to be on the podcast, and yeah.
Hey, salam, you guys, it's Nazish. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our next topic, which is culture versus Islam and our personal experiences. So for me, I'm from Gujarat, India, and obviously my parents came over here from there, and I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And the Muslim community in Atlanta is actually really big, but I lived 2 hours away from Atlanta. So it was like this really small town. There were literally no Muslims there. There was one Muslim family within I'd say 30 minutes of the area. So I wasn't really exposed to our Muslim community or even my culture. So my parents had a hard time trying to balance the whole culture and Islam into our lives. But I think they did a pretty good job because growing up, I didn't really feel like I had too much of one or the other. I didn't feel like either one was clashing. I didn't feel like I missed out on either part of culture or Islam. But after after 14 years, I'd say 13, 14 years, my parents moved from there to here, back to Chicago, Morton Grove. That's when I actually started seeing the culture versus Islam clashing. I saw people integrating culture into Islam and using that as labeling it as Islam.
I kind of agree with you. With me, I kind of find it hard to tell the difference because, I was born and raised here, but I kind of just was taught into both of them. I kind of at a young age, I wasn't aware of the difference between the two. I kind of just put the two and two together, and even at today's age, I still will not be fully. I can't fully comprehend the differences between the two. I'll sometimes clash the two.
I totally agree with you on that. I think especially growing up, again, I was born here, but growing up, I really wasn't able to separate the culture and religion. I kind of just thought it was the same thing. I went to Maine West High School, and there weren't as many Muslims there. And if there weren't really someone I can kind of, get my Islamic knowledge from. So not until, I would say honestly, since after graduating high school, I kind of was able to separate Islam and culture and understand the difference and what Islam preaches versus what we practice and do, and just really separate that. And I honestly think growing up, because I wasn't able to separate it, it was kind of hard for me to kind of understand, okay, why can't I do this? Is it because culturally we can't do it, or is it because Islamically we can't do it? And I just had a lot of questions, again, just because I didn't really understand the difference. And once you really understand the difference, once you're able to put okay, this is what we do in Islam, this is, the rules, and this is what Islam teaches us versus this is all just culture, you really start understanding, personally, I started understanding just the difference. And again, that's when I've kind of started going towards more of the Islamic path, because I started understanding it myself. I was able to answer the questions myself. So I think being able to separate and understand those two are very important.
Yeah. No, I also just definitely agree with what you're saying. So for me personally, growing up, I had a lot of the the Western side of culture growing up in the middle school, kind of like Nazir, kind of like the more, whereas you're not really having there's not a lot of people, or there's not a lot of Muslims at least in my middle school and my high school. So I wasn't really friends with a lot of Muslim people growing up. So that in itself, and on top of where I just came religiously in my family, like our Islamic like knowledge and our deen itself, like it was never super strong within my household at least. So that in turn with the schooling and the situation with school is just it never allowed me to kind of just get my Islamic knowledge and not only just like just practice my religion as much as I should have been, right? So for me, it actually ended up hitting me after high school, where I was able to find an organization like Mosin, which I talked about a little on the last podcast, that it allowed me to basically bring in my Islamic knowledge. I was able to surround myself with the deen. I was able to surround myself with individuals that practice Islam a lot more than I did, at least in the past, and it kind of set me on a straighter path. I would definitely say, and for me, it's like I've never looked back, and just managing that culture from the Western side, and then relating it back to Islam. That's something that I felt like it was definitely a good experience and something that I can never forget.
I have to agree with what you're saying. I actually found my deen after college too. I got closer to Islam and whatnot. I realized that I just came to the assumption that like in school you realize that growing up you kind of want to hide your religion and culture because you're scared of what people will say and they'll judge you. But then after you graduate high school and you're doing your own thing, you kind of accept it more, and that's kind of a commonality I feel like
A lot of us share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree with that?
I totally agree.
no.
Yeah.
There's so many Islamophobes. I feel like just growing up, you like not having that Islamic identity just kind of brings your morale down,
Yeah.
right? Growing up, it's like you're hearing all these bad things about your religion, and it's like, man, like you don't know what to think, right? So so that's definitely another aspect of it. So
When
Yeah.
you're surrounded by so many, like you're surrounded by Western everything, Western society, their morals, their beliefs, everything, you really do start kind of pushing your culture aside because you're trying so hard, like you said, to fit in. And it's not really, again, like you said, until, again, when I graduated from high school, when I found more people like, that were Muslims and that weren't afraid to kind of, freely practice Islam, like that's when I became really close to it myself. I'm like, okay, there's other people that aren't afraid to, pray in a classroom, and people who aren't afraid to like talk about it in classes and in different places. And that's really when I started becoming more comfortable, when you kind of step away from the Western aspects of everything, and you just kind of try to figure out your religion yourself.
I have a question for you, Anam. So
Yeah.
you're in hijabi, right?
Yes.
So for you, how like did you ever have any like backlash? Did people ever like confront you in any sort of way or ask you any questions? Like how did that?
So I actually started wearing the hijab a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So for 20 years of my life, I, showed my hair. I had it curly, straight, whatever. And no one really knew me as Muslim. Like, I just had my name. Right. I would get told like, oh, you look like Brazilian and this and that. Like no one would look at me and tell me that I look Muslim or Pakistani or whatever. So when I did start wearing the hijab, my whole life I knew how people treated me. Like I knew how people looked at me, talked to me, whatever. And unfortunately, when I did start wearing the hijab, I remember, I'm almost going to remember this, but I remember walking into work. I actually worked at a summer camp, so I'm always surrounded with children and their parents. And I've worked with these parents, obviously, before I wore the hijab, so they knew me. And I walked in wearing the hijab one day, and when I tell you, parents just did not look at me. Like, they just didn't talk to me. I think a few parents were, like, super blunt and asked me, why are you wearing that? Like, your hair is so beautiful, like, why are you wearing that? It's going to be a distraction, just a bunch of things. And honestly, if I were to make a decision to wear the hijab in high school, I think I would have immediately taken it off after hearing those kind of comments. It was because I found Islam, like obviously like found it and I understood it more, that I was comfortable and I didn't really care what people had to say because I wasn't embarrassed. If I were to wear it in high school, and that's why it took me so long. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. That's why I think I didn't wear it in high school. I always had the intentions to, but in high school, again, being surrounded by like, everyone just, again, not being in a school with not many Muslims, it's hard, you feel like you're just kind of like, you're like pointed out. It's discouraging. And I hated that I felt that way, but, I knew if I did wear it, I would have taken it off. I would have been upset. So I'm so glad, alhamdulillah, that I did that the whole focus, my whole mindset changed, and I'm comfortable, and alhamdulillah, like, it's honestly one of the best decisions I've made. So, yeah. Thank you for asking that.
No problem. So what are you guys thoughts on the aspect of prom, right? So for me, right, personally, I went to prom, and culturally, prom is something that, like if when I tell my cousins I went to prom, it's like, oh, what, you went to prom? Like, what's wrong with you? It's if I tell like one of my like pupils or call it like an aunt or something, they're gonna be immediately like, what? Like, you went to prom? Like, what's wrong with you? So for me, having that luxury of going to prom, like, I was able to. I told my parents are like, okay, that's fine, right? Because I'm a guy. So but then when my sisters, same household as me, right? Parents are just the same, like as far as like being strict with them or not. But when the topic of going to prom, when they asked, it was immediately no, it was shut down. So so for you two girls, right, on the podcast here, can you guys, I don't know if you guys have been in a similar situation, or if you guys have something that you could kind of talk about with something where it's like culturally you're not supposed to be doing something, and your parents or whatever just kind of shut you out from doing something like that, like something like prom.
Yeah, I don't know about Anam, but like I don't think I could, when back in the day, like I obviously couldn't even have asked my parents like, oh, can I go to prom? Can I go to homecoming? Because they would have immediately been like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you even ask me that? Like, why do you even think that's an option for you? Right. So yeah, I was just completely shut down. Not even an option for me.
I was lucky enough to go. I mean, not lucky. It was a waste of $50, but
I agree.
Right, it was such a waste of money. I was able to go after a lot of convincing. I think it was because my parents knew my friend group, which was a big reason why they let me go. And even a bigger reason they let me go was my friend group was all Desi people. Like, there weren't any Muslims, but, there were Indians, so they knew, like, okay, there are people around our people, so, you'll be good. But my parents didn't let me go to after prom. So they told me, okay, you can go to prom,
but
but
no boat or whatever.
No after prom business. I don't care if you're going to go to a friend's bonfire. Like, you have to be home by whatever time, And honestly, I think prom is really for after prom, right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
for
probably,
for after prom. So it really just, I just basically wish I never went, it wasn't really that fun. Yeah, you take pictures and you have memories and stuff, but looking back, personally for me, it wasn't worth it as a brown girl. Like, I didn't even get to wear something I wanted. I had to like wear layers on top of layers, covering like ankles to sleeves to like everything.
Yeah, I don't even feel like I missed out at this point.
Yeah, literally. I got to go, but I still felt like I just didn't fit in, Yeah. So, yeah.
I think we can talk about the stereotypes between brown, boys and girls in brown families, like what Maz was talking about for a while. I don't even remember my conversation with my parents about prom, but I went and they knew I was going. I just don't remember them. I don't remember them saying yes. I just remember wearing a tux and just being like, yeah, I gotta go. Yeah, I think that's what pretty much happened with me. In high school, there was I think there was a PSA, a SASA, and a MSA.
It was an Indo-Pac, yeah.
Yeah. And I was never attracted to any of them. I don't know why. I just wasn't a part of it. I think QS was too gimmicky for me, in my opinion. I don't want to offend anybody. It just did not seem like my cup of tea. I did show up to a couple meetings and stuff like that, but it just wasn't my thing. Same with PSA. Just I was never really. I had brown friends, but I just wasn't out there being social with my culture and stuff like that. But that all changed, and I feel like you guys can all relate to that. That all kind of changes after high school and after you grow up. I just especially remember like in elementary school, like at that age, you definitely don't want to expose your culture or anything about your religion. You want to stay as quiet as possible and just keep that on the low. I remember in high school, actually, like, I didn't want to no one wants to make wudu in the bathrooms.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you guys ever go through that stuff.
People get
you pray somebody doesn't walk in, see your feet in the sink, because you have no idea what to tell them. That's just one experience of mine that it was just something I would fear for my life. Just please don't let someone see my foot in this sink right now.
This is so little, but I would hate walking into Walmart and they see clothes. When I was little, like after a party or something, like, and you would have to pick up like a cake or something, and then my mom would be walking in like shalwar kameez, and me in like my shalwar kameez, and my dad in like his clothes, and I would be like, oh my god, this is so embarrassing. Like, why is everyone watching us? And now I'm like, whatever, like I don't care. Just walk in, walk out.
See, for me, it was actually really different because, like I said, when I grew up in Georgia, there was, like, nobody that I could say is like me. So in my elementary school, my middle school, I was literally the only Muslim and the only Desi kid there. So I felt weird having to hide it. Like I didn't want to hide it. So I was that annoying kid that would like constantly be like, "Oh my God, hey guys, I'm Indian, I'm Muslim, I'm this and that," and I would always like be telling them about everything. So when I came here to Chicago, I was so like, oh my God, I was so intrigued. I was like, oh my God, there's people like me. These are my people. I can get along with them. Like I can relate to them. I can talk to them about things. But what I did notice was a lot of people, like Tamur said, they were also reserved about their culture, their religion. They weren't so out there. They kind of like stayed away from all of that. So yeah, I definitely noticed that here.
So I have another hot take. I just thought about. So this is not my own personal experience, but this is people that I know within our culture at least. Where so like, let's say like there's a wife, right? A wife and a husband. Okay, and in this situation, a wife and a husband are let's say they begin to argue. Okay, so this like within the arguments, right? It's like let's say it becomes physical, right? So like let's say the wife in the situation goes back home. Okay, she goes back home and she's talking to her family, right? And she's like that she's telling the whole situation what happened, and then what. For in our culture at least, like how does the family respond? They say, "Oh no, don't worry about
go
it."
back.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. This is how marriage is. This is what marriage is. And the thing is, us growing up, like a lot of Desis take pride in this whole arranged marriage statistic of us being like, oh, we have the highest retention or whatever like that. But it's like, is our retention because of this?
It's toxic.
Is it?
Definitely,
Is it because
toxic.
of is it because of us just being okay with
Because
behavior
we're
like
saying
that?
we're literally labeling it as okay. We're saying, oh, Islamically, like that's not what we do,
Yeah, no, but we're normalizing something
We're
like
definitely- yeah.
like that.
But it's
where it's like
because we're
Islamically,
normalizing it through the culture.
right?
Yeah, we
Exactly.
say-
When
like, say that
Islamically,
it's
it's like Islamically, it's like
Islamically.
if you're not getting treated right properly, like
You
that,
need
like
to
No,
leave.
yeah,
of course.
like
No,
a
you
divorce
have
is
every
a
right.
divorce
They preach
is
the wrong
perfectly
things.
acceptable in
Yeah.
Islam. But the fact that again culturally, it's just like, oh, it's a bad look.
Yeah.
That in itself is just like, why are we condoning
Because
something like
that's
that?
where we're mixing. That's where we start mixing culture and religion. Like we don't differentiate. Like we don't differentiate what makes us actual Muslims other than our own culture. Like we start to say like, oh, like back home, like these things were probably not allowed. Even though in Islam, like we can probably do these things. Like you said, divorce and stuff like that. You shouldn't have to stay in a place where you're not treated right. Like that goes for anybody. But since culturally that's really frowned upon, even though it shouldn't be, we bring Islam into that. Like we say like, oh, Islamically this is wrong. Like I know like a lot of our parents have probably been like, oh, Islamically we shouldn't be allowed to do this, but really in Islam like it doesn't say anything like that.
All I wanted to say was, Maz, you watch a lot of Pakistani drama.
That is very true.
My question is, how do you guys balance what's right in Islam with what's culturally appropriate? Because I think with me, it just, I don't know, it at some point in your life you kind of figure out how to balance it, but it all comes to everyone differently in my opinion.
I think I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently, but I've realized that as a Muslim, you should always be putting Islam first. So if you know that what you're doing, if you even have a little bit of like oh, I don't think this is right, like, like I think I'm making
It's
my,
for a reason, yeah.
Whatever it is, like, if you know that Islamically you should be doing it this way, then you should obviously follow that. Again, this can go back to like the whole culture versus Islam and like all these topics where whether it be like marriages or
anything.
I mean there's so many
Yeah,
different
it goes anywhere.
It goes beyond, like, unfortunately there's
beyond
so
our
many
households, yeah.
so many different examples of it. At the end of the day, you need to see like Islamically, that's what we're at the end of the day we're Muslims, right?
Yeah,
and that's what we should be following. And culturally and all this other kind of stuff, like that's not going to be seen. Like that's not going to be seen, because these are all the things that we're making up now.
Yeah,
you know?
of course. Because that's
all
the thing.
these different stereotypes that we do, all the different things we say, like, oh, culture this, culture that, like, culture it's going to look bad, culturally you shouldn't do this, culturally you shouldn't do that, what are these people going to say, what are these people all of that, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. So for me, it's like a lot to think about, but at the end of the day, that's kind of like what I think.
That's why I feel like it's really important to have Islamic knowledge. Like, we're always in that mindset, like, oh, log kya kahenge about this and that. But, like, we don't really know, like, what Islam teaches. And that's why, like, it's really hard for people to separate Islam and culture, because culture can change. It's always changing. Like, there's different things coming out. But religion is the one thing that stays consistent and that we cannot change. So that's why it's really important to have that Islamic knowledge.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like when I moved to Chicago, that's when I first started seeing the problem with my parents, where they started mixing religion and culture. I don't know. Maybe it's probably just because there are more Muslims here, more deities here. And I just saw that like being way more of an issue after I moved from Georgia to a bigger Muslim Desi community. Yeah, it was just, I don't know. I just started seeing like them calling out things for religion when in fact it was actually culture. Like I didn't see that at all in Georgia. Like even looking back, like I definitely did not see that to be a problem back then. But now after I moved here, like I saw it evolving.
And you really, at least for me, I didn't realize how toxic it is until I got to got to this age, and I think that's why I was so like not apart from Islam, but I had such a hard time connecting to Islam because there was just so many like mixtures of like culture and this, and I'm like, oh, this is like, oh, Islam teaches this, like why? And at the end of the day, it's actually culture that we're
people
promoting,
mix it so much,
and it's so bad. Like, you know, Islam is so beautiful, and
people just ruin it
exactly.
with
So
these made up things.
it really is important to differentiate between culture and Islam and know like, okay, whatever this person is saying or whatever this is happening, it's culturally like like this is the mindset, and then this is, you know, Islam and so on. So I did varsity track all 4 years of my high school time, and again, I wasn't a hijabi back then, so you know, I didn't have to worry about wearing a hijab. But during meets like spring season, when we would be outside, you know, instead of wearing like the shorts, I would be in leggings, and instead of wearing like the tanks, I would have my Under Armour like full sleeve thing, and then I would wear my uniform. And I've actually had like coaches, not my personal, actually, yeah, I had my personal coach once tell me that I can't wear it. I can't be wearing leggings underneath my shorts, and I can't be wearing Under Armour under my, you know, my uniform. And I was like, hey, this is my religion. Like, you know, like, what am I supposed to do? I can't take, I'm not going to show my legs. I'm not going to show my arms. And he's like, well, I need a letter. I'm like, what kind of letter? Like, where do you want me to pull out a letter from? He's like, I don't know. I just need a letter that, you know, indicates that you really can't wear, you know, like leggings, and you really can't wear Under Armour because you don't look in the team. Like, everyone's running, and, you know, it's just a bunch of excuses. Like, this is lowering your speed. And mind you, I was the fastest girl on my team. Yes. But I was just all these excuses, and I was just like, okay. And I let it go, and I didn't, I mean, where was I supposed to get a letter from? But I've heard this so many times, like, either it would be like, you know, Western society, like, aren't you hot in that? Like, how are you running in that? How are you not dehydrated? You know, you're getting so hot, like, you know, all of this stuff. And sometimes, like, it really does make you feel like, okay, like, why am I wrong? You know, like, alhamdulillah, I never had the what's the word? Like, I never had the feeling to ever not wear it, because I knew at the end of the day, my religion is a lot more stronger than the Western society, Western culture, you know, lashback of whatever they're saying. And, you know, like, I still did whatever I had to, and I still did it, you know, in a most halal way possible. So I mean, if anything, this is kind of like a little advice for anyone that's listening, and then that they may feel like, you know, they can't really, that they're struggling going back and forth from their, you know, whether it be Western culture or your Desi culture or whatever it may. At the end of the day, you do what's right, you know, and it'll be fine. People will talk. People might say something for the first few times. You just brush it off, and you'll be fine. Like, again, I think if I were to do whatever, you know, like the whole, you know, not wear leggings and all that stuff, I know I would have felt guilt. Like, at the end of the day, I would have totally felt guilt, if not like the first, you know, meeting and the first track, whatever, and if not then or the end of the season, I would have went back home and been like, did I really put away my religion for something so stupid, like something as simple as just wearing extra clothes underneath my uniform when I still ran the exact same speed? It didn't slow me down. It didn't change my records. It didn't change my, like, anything. So, yeah.
It's like giving in to, like, what their Western society puts out.
Exactly. You really do need to have your own personal strength. Exactly. You know, you really can't give in. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And I totally get it, especially if we look at how the society is now, if we look at like high school kids now. And I mean, I only graduated 4 years ago. But if I look back at like my brother just graduated from, he's a senior in high school. Then I have another brother who's a freshman in high school. When they tell me their stories of like what people have been telling them to do, like, hey, bro, let's go vape, let's go do this. Like, hey, like, you know, we're going to say we're going to basketball, we're going to go somewhere else. Like, it's so toxic and it's so misleading. So it does become really, really hard, but you just need to really have your own personal strength. You need to understand what you're doing at the end of the day. Your religion is your religion, and culture is culture. And if the culture is wrong, whatever the culture is teaching, if it's wrong, then don't do it. So again, it's a lot easier when it's
said than done.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really just like a test of your faith at that point, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
But when you pass it, the feeling I got of not, like, when I look
Not
back
giving
now,
in, right?
yeah, the feeling, like, I could proudly say, like, alhamdulillah, like, I did everything, and I did it in a halal way, I wore my uniform properly, like, everything, and I still did well. It feels so good to just say it, like, I didn't give in, like, I didn't fall for that, I didn't listen to my coach, like, oh, why are you wearing, like, Under Armour, like, you don't look presentable in the team picture, like, just silly things like that. Like, at that point, you might feel like, oh, I feel, like, left out, like, maybe I should take it off, like, blah, blah, blah. But no, like, it seems so small, you know, so.
But it builds your iman at that, like, when it gets to
it
that
does,
too.
it definitely does.
I actually had a very similar story as well, and I just thought about it. So in high school, I was on the soccer team, and so my freshman year, I was on the soccer team. Second year, sophomore, also on the soccer team, and then so going into my junior year, right? It's, you know, you want to try to make the varsity team, and it was in order to make the varsity team, you have to do summer camp, right? So going into summer camp, it was also the same time as Ramadan.
Oh.
And so this was definitely something that, so I was fasting, right? I was fasting, and it's super hot, you're constantly running. And I was basically told that I had to kind of make a decision, because I told them I was fine with it, because, you know, it wasn't trying to, like, it was definitely probably, like, affecting my performance or whatever it was, but I was still showing up. I was still doing it. But
trying,
for them, it was just like, it was a matter of, this is not healthy for what you're doing. So you have to basically make a decision. And for me, you know, it came down to, you know, like I'm not going to give up fasting for something like this. For a
Yeah.
It's like
sport.
choosing your religion
Right,
over a sport.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then again, that's exactly what I did. You know, I just basically, I told them I was like, I'm just not going to do soccer. And then that's kind of where it ended. And now it's like, you know, people will reach out to me like, oh, yeah, I remember you used to play soccer all the time. Like, what happened? You know, it's like, basically I tell them straight up, like, you know, that, like, I had to just make a decision. And again, at the end of the day, I'm glad I made that decision. I would never, you know, I'll never go back and change that, because again, like, that in itself, like, that brought me closer to my religion. And, you know,
And doesn't
I
it
knew
feel
my
so
principles.
good?
It is, yeah,
It does.
exactly.
It feels so good.
It does, yeah.
It's so heartbreaking that you have to choose between, like, one or the other, because that's what
Yeah.
society puts in front of us.
Right.
I feel like that's such a problem nowadays. Like, they don't understand our side ever.
Unfortunately, it's because they're, like, ignorant, I guess.
I
of the
know, it's
situation.
Yeah,
really
for
annoying.
sure.
Yeah.
That's a whole different issue.
So for me, fortunately enough, I was always surrounded by brown people in my high school and stuff like that. Like, I had Indian and then Malayalam friends, Hindus, all that, and Muslims. Like, we're all a pretty diverse group of individuals. So I was always pretty close to my deen, but my friends actually helped me keep more in close with it and stuff like that. Like, one of my friends would always he would push me to come to Tarawih, and he'd actually always pick me up for Fajr every morning. And that's what actually kept me on top of my game, because my parents, I always prayed at home, but my parents never felt the need, like, hey, you should go to the masjid and stuff like that. But I was always like, hey, my friend's going to pick me up. And they're like, yeah, go for it. And they were all open to it, which is something that really, like, kept me closer to myself. So basically what I was trying to get to is that I think having Muslim friends really helped me keep in touch with my culture and my deen, like, simultaneously, which is something that they have in common. Islam did guide me in my friend choices. Like, I was always a straightforward kid. Like, I always wanted to do what I can, and I had a Islamic mindset that I confused with a cultural mindset. Like, hey, I want to be a good kid. I don't want to do bad things when I go to high school and stuff like that. Like, it's very, because I don't know, my parents enforced that on me very strictly. So again, like, when I made Muslim friends and I realized, like, hey, there's other people like me, that's what kind of kept me closer in. And that's why I was like, hey, I actually want to find more friends like this, rather than finding the non-Muslim friends that had different morals. But that definitely, having Muslim friends kept me in tune with my culture and religion simultaneously.
I would agree. I would agree definitely because so for me again also like my high school friends, right? After they went away from college, all these kids became just hardcore potheads. And now that we're 21, all they want to do when they're back here is just kind of go out to bars and things like that. And for me, and it's always, a situation where it's like they come out and they're like, oh, let's go hang out. It's like, I don't want to do that. I'm at a point in my life where it's like, you know what, like that is something that I don't like. I won't enjoy it. Like I'm going to go to a bar. I'm going to sit there. Like I will not enjoy that. So I always let them know, like, if there's any, if you're ever doing something that is not that, like if you're just chilling, hanging out, I'll definitely open to coming, but as far as, anything related to, drinking, drugs, things like that, just leave me out of it because at the end of the day, like that's not what I want to do. And I've made that clear now. So that's something that I definitely see.
So I totally agree with you, Maz. In high school, like I said before, I didn't have any close Muslim friends, but I did have like Hindu friends, right? And they were kind of like the closest I could get to like our people. And although, in high school, we couldn't really do much, they weren't 21. So it's not like they went drinking or anything. But once we graduated from high school, I realized that every time they would come back or, when we would celebrate birthdays or anytime they would come back home and want to go out, it would always be like either clubbing or drinking or happy hour or whatever. And slowly I started realizing that, okay, I love them. Like they're always going to be my friends, but I can't hang out with them anymore. Like,
that's actually very interesting because so you said that you have Hindu friends, right?
Yeah.
So culturally, Hindu friends are very similar to us, right? In the aspect of we are speaking the same languages and we are, like Bollywood, things like that. All that stuff is kind of, similar. But then again, you have that aspect of religion, right? And that's how you were able to separate yourself. So for us, to try to preach is kind of like some advice, right? To like the youth is, to try to make sure that you can try to find that fine line and then make sure you are, you're making sure that you're not, you're a part of that or you're not a part of that. Sorry.
So overall, now that I look back at like what we talked about and came across, like the advice that I would want to give is just like it's hard to like you won't think about it too much, you won't really grasp it. I feel like, but it's like just do you. Don't be afraid of your culture or your religion. If you're listening to this and you're like a young student in high school and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure we were all very reserved, and that of course you would want to be reserved because you don't want to be judged and you'd want to fit in with people, but culture is cool, but don't lose track of your deen. Deen is very important in Islam and stuff like that. So please try to stay on top of your game and don't let it bother you.
That judgment only goes so far. So there's so much more beyond that. Like our religion literally makes up our entire identity. What do we take to the grave? We don't take like our culture to the grave. We take our religion, our good deeds, like all these things that we've done. That's what matters in the end. That's what we have to focus on. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Like don't get sidetracked by things that like temporary things like culture and stuff like that.
Thank you guys for tuning in on this episode of the podcast of Unfiltered this week. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Feel free to DM us with your anything you want to say about our episodes, like any comments or ask us questions, and we'll make sure to feature you on the podcast if you like, and we might touch up upon it. Thank you.